morning children. Once again welcome back to class 11 microeconomic class. So we were discussing chapter number 3 producer behavior and supply. In the last class we have discussed about the meaning of production and who is a producer, and also one important concept related to production, that is production function. Okay. So today we are going to discuss about production function. Okay, what do you mean by production function? So, as we seen before, the production function is the expression of functional relationship between input and output is known as production function. Okay, so what do you mean by production? Production means the transformation of input into output. Then the relationship between input and output is expressed through production function. Okay. So mathematically it can expressed as Q is equal to F of x1, x2. So production function refers to functional or mathematical relationship between input and output. For various quantities of input used, it gives the maximum quantity of output that can be produced. So with the help of input, how much quantities of output can produce? So it's shown by the production function. So it can be expressed in terms of Q is equal to F of x1, x2. It means that by using x1 amount of factor 1 and x2 amount of factor 2, we can almost produce Q amount of output. Okay, that is here we are using x1 factor 1 and factor 2 for producing Q unit quantities of output. So this is the function production function. Okay, for example, here 1240 M is equal to F of 5L and 6K. What is the meaning of this production function? It says that maximum 1240 unit of commodity M can be produced by using 5 units of labor and 6 units of capital. Here L stands for labor and K stands for capital. Okay. Students, please note that there may be many other factors as well as, but we have assumed there are only 2 factors, labor and capital, or factor 1 or factor 2. Okay. So there are a lot of factors that associated with the production function, but we assumed that there are only 2 factors, x1 and x2, and in our example labor and capital. Okay students, then we are going to the next topic, that is types of production function. What are the types of production function? So on the basis of time dimension or time period, the production function can be divided into short period or short run production function and long period or long run production function. In the previous class we have discussed about the different periods, different time dimensions of production, a very short period and long period. So according to the time period, production function are divided into short period production function and long period production function. So short period production function is otherwise known as short run production function, and long period production function is otherwise known as long run production function. So first one, short run production function. What do you mean by short run production function? As we discussed earlier, in short period, production can be increased only by increasing the variable factor, fixed factor remain constant. This is the situation in short period. In short period, the producer can vary only variable factor, change only variable factor, then the other factor is fixed. Okay. So Q is the function of x1, x2. Here x1 is the variable factor S2 is the fixed factor. So what is variable factor? Those input that vary directly with output are called variable factor. Okay. Then what is fixed factor? Fixed factor means those factors that are that cannot be changed in short run. That is known as fixed factor. It cannot vary with output. Okay. So in short run, production function is the function of variable factor and also fixed factor. So Q is the f of x1, x2. Then x1 is the variable factor, s2 is the fixed factor. So change in physical output of a good when one factor input is variable and other are fixed is known as short run production function. So that is the production function which includes one variable factor and other fixed factor is known as short run production function or short period production function. So the short run production function defines the relationship between one variable factor and output. Okay. So the producer can increase production only by increasing the quantity of one factor, that is variable factor. The other factors are remain constant. So it is a relationship between output and one variable factor or output and variable factors. Okay. So in this production function, one law is applicable. That law is known as law of return to a factor. So the law which operates in short run is known as law of return to a factor. We will discuss about law of return to a factor, the law of return to a factor in later. So now you understood, just understand this law of return to a factor is applicable in short run. Okay. Then next production function is long run production function. Okay. What is the meaning of long run production function? So what about the long period? During this period, production can be increased by increasing the quantity of fixed and variable factor both. Okay. There is no distinction between fixed factor and variable factor. Both factor can change in order to increase the quantity of output. Okay. There is no fixed factor. Both factors. Here we have taken only two factors. So the producer can increase both factors. Okay. So that is the specialty of long period. So producer will get sufficient time to change fixed factor also. Okay. So the production function in long period is known as long run production function. That is change in physical output of a good when all the factors input are variable and there is no distinction between the fixed and variable factor is known as long run production function. Okay. So the long run production function is different in concept from short run production function. Here all factors are varied in the same proportion. So the law which operates in long run is known as law of return to scale. So what about the short run? In short run, the law which operates in short run is known as law of return to a factor. Here a is the very important, but here the law is law of return to scale. Okay. So producer can change in a same proportion of x1 and x2. That's why the law is known as law of return to scale. Okay. So next we are moving on to the difference between short run production function and long run production function. So in short run production function, production increased by increasing the quantity of only one factor. Whereas in long run production function, production is increased by increasing the quantity of all factors. There is no distinction between fixed factor and variable factor. All factors are variable. Then in short-run production function can expressed as Q is equal to f of x1, x2. Here x1 is the variable factor, x2 is the fixed factor. Whereas in long-run production function expressed as Q is equal to f of x1, x2, and both factors or both inputs are variable. Okay. Then in short-run production function, producer cannot change the quantity of all factors. There is one fixed factor. Okay. So or there is only one variable factor. All other factors are fixed. So producer cannot change the quantity of all factors. At the same time, in long run production function, it is possible to change the quantity of all factors. Okay. Then in short run production function, proportion in which factor changes is variable, because one factor is fixed, another is variable. So producer can increase the production only by increasing the one variable or one factors. So the proportion now factor change is variable. Okay. At the same time, in long run production function, proportion in which factor change is fixed. That means the producer can change both x1 and x2 in a same proportion or in a fixed proportion. Okay. So in short run production function, the law that applies is law of variable proportion, is otherwise known as law of return to a factor. Okay. Here the output is the function of one factor. That's why this law is known as law of return to a factor. At the same time, in long run production function, the law that applies is law of return to scale. Okay. So the proportion, the change in both factor in a same proportion. That's why the law is known as law of return to scale. Okay, students. So these are the difference between short run production function and long run production function. Then you have to study this production functions very well. We have to study detailed explanation of short-run production function only, but we should know at least this much about long-run production function. Okay, students, that was today's section. So today we have discussed about short-run production function and long-run production function. Then also the characteristics of short-run and long-run production function. Okay, students. So as usual, you have to watch the URL, attend the test paper, download your notes and study it well. See you in the next class. Bye.